This is the story of the one. As a maintenance engineer, he hears things differently. To the untrained ear, everything on his shop floor might sound fine, but he can hear gears grinding or a belt slipping. So he steps in to fix the problem at hand before it gets out of hand. And he knows Grainger's got the right product he needs to get the job done, which is music to his ears. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Anatomy of an ad.
Subconsciously trigger emotions through music. Perfect.
Define an opportunity.
Imagine talking to millions of people across the U.S. like I am now.
Identify a problem.
Creating an audio ad is time-consuming.
Offer a solution.
Utilize cutting-edge AI. Imagine creating all that in under 30 seconds. Well, we did, to create this ad. To learn more about AI in the audio industry, download the white paper from audiostack.ai.
All right, welcome to the Jason Ross Show. I'm here with Mitchell Cohen, founder of Pornhub. That's the wrong notes. I do have Mitchell Cohen back. He's back. He's in Austin, Texas. He's back in the Lone Star State from his travels. I can't wait to hear about your year of working remote. But one day I'm on a walk and I'm listening to Tim Ferriss, and he does his typical, "Hey folks, this is Tim Ferriss, and today's show is sponsored by Pornhub." And I don't know why I was walking and just laughed out loud. And so I've been wanting to use that opening for a while for someone that could be so further from the founder. So congratulations, dude. You're the guy.
Thank you for that. Thanks for that, Jason. It's good to be here. It's good to get out of the porn industry for a little bit. So happy to spend my Saturday with you.
Fantastic. I mean, could you imagine that's, I guess that whoever that is, I've never looked that up, but I guess, that dude's rich. But anyway, all right. So you're back. And so I know that, and for the listener, let me tell you something. Whenever you do an interview with Mitchell Cohen, he is like uber optimized. He is like, if ever, I like to think that I'm on a mission to improve always and always as is the motto of the show. But Mitchell, you take it to a new level. And so it's always fun to see what you're doing. And so I actually have some things that we could talk about. We probably will, as provided by Mitchell Cohen, because he's never going to go into an interview without a backup plan. And I love that. But the first thing I want to talk about is your year abroad. How was it, first of all?
Yes. Well, first off, thank you for the kind intro and words of description. It's funny that you mentioned the optimization thing. Mm-hmm. I think part of the trip, so I spent almost exactly 12 months in South America, and it was one of those things. I actually talked to you on the podcast last time when I was in Colombia, I believe.
Yeah.
So it was a good little snapshot of the beginning of my journey towards here, wherever we are now, towards hopefully the middle of the journey that continues. But was there for a year, just got a one-way ticket, was planning to just be open. And when it comes to optimization, like you pointed out, I tend to like to optimize things, or just put thought into it and research and due diligence. I think you and I might be similar in that regard. However, I'm now learning that there's a thing called over-optimization.
Oh,
and
really?
Sometimes it's okay to not optimize every aspect of our lives. And so that actually is something that I've been thinking about a lot. I was listening and writing something recently about this concept of wonder, which they described on this podcast of it's curiosity, just staying in the question, not seeking the answer. And there's something sort of beautiful or profound about, because I love curiosity, but then I want the answer right away, right? And so when I was traveling, it was a good thought exercise for me to be like, usually I would have every place planned. I would try to optimize it. And so it was for me the ability to just be like, oh, I'm going to buy a one-way plane ticket to this country. If I want to stay there longer, I can. If I want to go to another place, I can. So I ended up going to a handful of places. Colombia was for Colombia for 3 months, Argentina for 4 months, and then bounced around in Brazil for a couple months, Costa Rica for a bit, then up back to Mexico, and now back in Austin.
So, all right. So tell me when this kind of sank in. Like, when did you start to think that, maybe I haven't left enough room for adventure. I've got this too planned out. I know exactly where I'm going to be. Even though I'm in a foreign land, I know I'm going to be at this location in 20 minutes, 20 hours. When did you finally start to go, man, and what made you think that? What was the kind of the feedback you were getting internally that made you say, yeah, maybe I've kind of just planned this out too thoroughly?
To open up some of that space to planning, you're saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think even just from the get-go of doing something like this, it's funny, like whenever you do these things that are different or not used to, or at least speaking for myself, it feels like a very heavy, big thing. Like I remember I grew up in Indiana and then went to school at Indiana University, and I was like, should I take this job in Chicago? Like, whoa, what would that be like? That's like way over there. And then you go do that. It's like, oh, that's like right next door. That's no big deal at all. And then when I was thinking about moving to Austin, I was like, whoa, should I move to Texas? Like, am I going to like mess up the trajectory of the universe, or what should I be doing? And that's another question that I've reflected on recently of constantly shoulding yourself, or psychologists call this like masturbation of like, oh, I must be doing this, or should I be doing this? And so anyway, back to the move from Illinois to Texas is like, oh, you do that? It's like, oh, it's not that big a deal at all. And then this most recent thing of living in South America, it's like, whoa, should I go to South America for a year, for a month? Should I at least do this? And I felt that internal feeling of a little bit of scared, and then a lot of bit of curiosity. And it got to be the point where it's like, oh, I now know I should do this. And as soon as I made up my mind that I should do it, I knew it was right, because I've had these other examples or breadcrumbs, call them intuition or whatnot, in my life. And whenever I trust them, great things happen. And so just learning to sort of trust that more, and then saying like, okay, part of this whole thing is going to be not planning everything out, because you can't plan everything out. What if I connect with people? What if I like it and I want to stay longer? What if I don't like it and I want to leave sooner? So that was sort of the impetus. And it's easier to, once we make these heavier decisions, or at least for me, I immediately knew it was the right thing for me to do once I made the decision. I think there's a lot of like internal, should I do this? Should I do that? Blah, blah, blah. But then once there's the actual decision that's made, it's like, oh yeah, that feels right. I'm not even going to try to fight it. And then just be open.
I just had this conversation with someone this week, as a matter of fact, along those similar lines of, he's kind of struggling with a career decision as to whether to walk through that proverbial door A or door B. And I told him, I said, I used to really struggle with door A or door B, this or that. And I still do, especially, man, I went through this spell after I turned 40, to where you start to realize the fuse is getting shorter, the runway is getting shorter. And so like you put all of this weight on the decisions even more so. I told him, I said, it's an amazing thing that both mentally, emotionally, and any category you want to put it in, whatever door you walk through, you kind of just go, okay, here we are. You will survive through that door. It's not like the Wile E. Coyote, the old Roadrunner cartoons where you open the door and you go off a cliff. And then it's not like that. And so I too have tried to, one, take some of the pressure off of myself, with thinking that I still suffer, Mitchell, and maybe you've got some advice, you can help me with this. I still suffer with like not having any hobbies and unable to do anything that I don't find what I consider productive. Great example. This morning, it's a Saturday morning. Listeners, this is Jason and Mitchell at 11 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and there's nothing I'd rather be doing. I don't feel like we're sitting here doing a podcast, catching up, and I love it because, one, I get to, maybe it's over optimization, I get to catch up with you. I get to talk to my friend I haven't talked to in a minute and find out about your adventures. But I'm also creating some content. I'm adding to the show. I think that you're fascinating, what you've done. I hope others will be inspired to take some risks. So there's nothing I'd rather be doing. I don't want to be sitting around and I like college football. And kind of like today, whenever I got up this morning, it's beautiful here in Tyler. And so I went on a bike ride and I listened to College Game Day while I'm on my ride in the woods. And so, but I don't want to be at a football game right now. And I wish I did. I kind of wish I did. Do you ever struggle with that? And please help me, Mitchell. How can I make life more fun? just doing the stuff that normal people do.
So maybe it relates to my your intro and me being the founder of Pornhub. I'm noticing a little bit of masturbation coming through the microphone, Jason. And it's interesting because I think a lot of people share the same sentiment of like, oh, we're doing this, but should I be doing this thing over here? Or like, oh, I really like this, but like, what would this look like over here? And one of the things that has really, really helped me, recently. And so I keep a list each year. I use Evernote, but you could use whatever, but, I call it the year and then highlight reel. So I have a 2023 highlight reel. And then the first section, I have golden nuggets. And this is just like the things that I've learned that I can't unlearn. They're like such golden nuggets and these like aha moments or intellectual epiphanies that I want to revisit and I want to like actively use. And so this is at one of the top things on my golden nuggets list. And it's this concept of ideation versus iteration. And for me, I'm naturally like to spend time in ideation, like think about the idea. Oh, what if I did this? Blah, blah, blah. It's kind of like what we're talking about, the masturbation, or should I do this? And then I've found that the quicker that I move out of ideation and into iteration, actually trying the thing, getting a feedback loop and then getting new information or data on like, oh, I actually don't want to do this at all. I'm glad I learned. Or, oh, I thought I wanted this one thing, but it turns out it's the other thing that I would have never known if I stayed in ideation mode. So just as an easy mantra that I think about is, how can I move from this? Ideation's great. It's good to think about things, but how can I move as quickly as possible for the things that I care about out of ideation into iteration and get some like real world feedback, like actually experiment or being in the action versus just the motion.
I like that. And, and I think I've gotten more, I take action better than I once did. And here's one of the things I've allowed myself to do, is, again, it's not exactly exploring, just kind of doing things for the fun of it. Haven't got there yet, but I have allowed myself to be more of a satisfied generalist. I used to beat myself up for being a generalist. I would, I literally, my streams of income are so weird. The worst question anyone can ever ask me is, so what do you do? I freaking hate that question, because if I explain it, most people are like, so do you do anything? And so finally I really, and this sounds so trite, Mitchell, but it's the honest to God truth. I've finally been okay being comfortable with the fact that I have avoided a real job for 25 years and I'm okay with that. That's what I do. And it's because I try to find connection in the different things I do. And some things I do are just purely to make money to fund the things that I love to do. So I've gotten better at that, and then also taking action on things I used to be someone, I don't know if you ever suffered from this, but I used to not want to take action on a thing because I always thought that if I take action on it, that action has to last forever. And now I'm like, no, nothing is forever. You've got enough artifacts throughout your life to realize that you started things that didn't make sense and you backed out of them and it was okay. You don't miss it. You just relieved, some pressure. So I've gotten a little better about being willing to start things, knowing that it doesn't have to be forever. But that's one of the things that I wish that I knew how to enjoy things more just for the sake of enjoy. I can, and you brought it up before. I've been on your show before talking about Mrs. Right. I do better with Mrs. Right than I do anything. I can go, like we had an unbelievable European trip this year. And, with her, it was the first trip I can remember on that literally, man, day one, touching down in London. And I didn't think about what was going on back here. I just did. I used to not do that. And so I've gotten better about that. But man, just on my own, having hobbies that are just for the sake of just, kind of checking out of the everyday grind. I got to work on that.
Can I add a piece here where, so you mentioned like the what do you do question. I've always been curious about that question. And when I moved to Austin, I noticed that different cities will have these like, or different areas of the country or world sort of have these different whispers or undertones where, they say like in LA, it's kind of like be famous. In New York, it's like be rich. In DC, it's like be influential. And then in Austin, it was like be you. And I heard it at this like talk when I first moved here. And I was like, that kind of like sounds a little woo woo, but like, yeah, I guess that makes sense. And it wasn't till living here for a little while that I was like, oh, I actually understand what that means. And what made me understand that was the first question people would ask, where I had spent about 6 years in Chicago. And the first question was Austin, like, what do you do? And what do you do sort of implies like, let me size you up a little bit. What can you do for me?
Absolutely. 100%.
And then I noticed in Austin that the first question was instead, what do you do for fun? And so, obviously this depends on the circles you hang out and whatnot. But like in general, I was like, oh, that's interesting. They're kind of talking about this fun thing. And then once it loops back to what do you do professionally, it's like you already have this real rapport, and it's like, oh, you're in marketing or entrepreneurship. Like you have to meet my friend so-and-so. And like, it's just more sort of authentic maybe. And I thought that was just it until recently. I think that we could take it a step further and ask either two other questions. I'm a big believer in like just asking the right questions to find these insights and to change our directions. And so, one of the ways is just, what are you doing at this point in the world? Or like keeping it very vague of like, that doesn't imply, someone asked me this the other day where it's just like, what are you up to at this like point in the world? It was like so like vague and stated differently, where I could have answered it work, I could answer it fun, and it was like an open invite. And then the other question I like is, and some of these are more so like self-reflection too, of it's just like, what do you believe? And the what do you believe thing always has me really interested, because a couple years ago I wrote this life investment thesis on my blog, and the thought was like, take the smartest people in the world who may be working in finance or maybe working at like investment management shops, and they're making financial decisions, and to inform these decisions, they have an investment thesis, right? They look at the macroeconomic environment, they look at tailwinds, headwinds, and they're making these bets that are calculated. They're like, we see that, the puck's going over here, so we're placing this bet, but we also see this thing over here, so we want to diversify a little bit. And I recently had this realization that all life is a resource allocation game at the end of the day. And we understand this with capital resources and allocating capital and money, but we often forget it with the most precious resource of all time, right? And so when I think about, okay, wherever I am with whatever information I have up until this point, which by the way, we're the smartest we've ever been. We have the most experiences to draw from. But we also are very subject to inertia of like, oh, I've always just kind of done this, so I'll just keep doing it. And so I is to remind myself every so often to like, zoom way out and like, what do I actually believe right now? And so I'm revisiting that old blog post I did a couple years ago, and then writing a new one of like, oh, here are all the things I believe. Here's, where I think things are going. Here's the active bets I'm taking. And also in there is like opening up space. Again, I don't want to optimize like every single aspect. Part of what I believe is I should optimize less. Right. So what does that look like? And I think that whether it's putting content out on the internet or connecting with people, the what do you believe question and the things that follow that are naturally going to magnetize the different ideas and people way more than what do you do or what do you do for fun.
Yeah, I like that. And it's one of the questions that I get prickly about when people ask, what do you do? Because I think it's, I don't want this to come out the wrong way, but okay. Here's why I enjoy a conversation like this with you so much. And it's not just because we're into the same things, but it's because of the things that we're both into, which is kind of like the life experience and not wasting it and figuring out what really matters. Not how can I be rich? Like you talk about content creation. I'm probably the least likely consumer of somebody like Grant Cardone's social media stuff than anybody else in the world. That's not Grant Cardone is intelligent and has done well at that. But if you're known for helping people learn how to make a crap ton of money, I'm not there. It's just not who I am. And so I get flustered whenever, because when you told me the first kind of the thing about going to Austin, dude, where it's kind of taken to the nth degree is like in Dallas. In Dallas, people want to know. There was always kind of this funny thing whenever, when I was in college, especially in the dating scene, girls, when they ask you in Dallas, what do you do? The second question is always going to be, does that pay well? Yeah, it's never, and to me, what do you do for fun talks more about who you really are, because it's what you would do whether you're getting paid for it or not. And that kind of says the type of person that you are. And so I can't stand it when people, they just are, and I know it's been used to death. I've used it to death, but kind of this whole living in the matrix mindset of I like the things and do the things that the matrix says I'm supposed to. I reflect what the matrix says that I'm supposed to eat, say, house I'm supposed to live in, car I'm supposed to drive, all this crap. And so I've gotten to this point where I have almost a hard time. Yeah, I have a hard time. It's not as stimulating to be around people that just never even consider these things, that just are like literally, they never stop to think about, yeah, I mean, what does life really mean to me? I don't know. That's one of those things that I'm really trying to, and I think that that's one of the things I do like about this stage of my life is, man, whenever I was the biggest poser that there ever was whenever I was in my 30s. And I mean, I would do all these things to try to look important and smart and successful. And fortunately, I was so good at the game. I had some success. So it was real in the sense that I had some success. It was false in the sense that I enjoyed any of it and that it's really anything I cared about. And then it got to the point where I am now, which is like having these kind of conversations and digging deep into, yeah, you got to make a living. You got to be responsible. Mrs. Wright wants me to make sure that we still have food and that sort of thing. But also, I'm not going to pursue the monetary wealth or the material wealth at the expense of the things that truly matter to me on a daily basis. And I'm okay with that. That's a big shift I've taken over the years.
Yeah, I like that a lot. I think about this almost like a life flow chart where at the very top, it's like, what do you want? Do you want an average life or do you want a non-average life? I want a non-average life. Okay. What does a non-average life look like to you? What does it feel like? What is it specifically? And then you keep on sort of going down like, oh, okay, well, that is different from what I see in other places. So in order to have this different output, I probably need to have different inputs. And going back to the inertia thing, like that is just against our natural human behavior to do anything different. And so at each point or each check-in or, going back to the zooming way out periodically, and it's hard to do that because we're busy. We have work, we have responsibilities. And so to the extent possible, finding those ways, or maybe it's the people or the, just the natural check-ins to say like, oh yeah, I know that I sometimes can just get stuck over here. So I need to zoom out. And this is the direction I want over in this other way. And I was reflecting on even, actually you asking me to come on this podcast was, I was very appreciative because it's like another great check-in for me. I asked you before, like, yo, what do you want to talk about? And you're like, your 1 year travel. Like, what do you mean? I was like, oh yeah. I kind of was like, oh, I already did that sort of thing. I was like, I have a bunch of other things I'm thinking about right now, But you saying that and me just sort of reflecting on that, walking around this last couple of days, I was like, yeah, what are the main lessons, or what did I learn or whatnot? And I wrote like a LinkedIn blog post that seemed to get a lot of traction right when I got back, of like, here are the 5 lessons from 5 countries. But that was just it. I didn't really think about it too much. And one of the things I've put in my golden nuggets for the year is just these 3 simple favorite reflection questions that, I don't know about you, but like you hear of like, oh, here are the 20 best reflection questions or like journaling prompts or whatever. And my mind is always like, oh yeah, I should probably do that more. I like that stuff, but like, I don't need 20 or monthly. And then I just like end up not doing it. It's too many. And except for these 3 are like literally my favorite 3 questions. And I like it how versatile they are, because you could use them for work or a project or business. You could use them for, at the end of this podcast, you could use them for projects, whatever. And it's just simple reflection questions of what worked well, what did not work well, and what did I learn for next time? What will I do next time? And it's so easy. You can do it at the end of each day, but it implies that what worked well, what didn't work well, that you tried something. So moving out of the ideation, moving into the iteration to get that feedback. And it also implies that you're going to try something again using what you learned. What will I do different next time? And so, those are the 3 simple ones that I was actually applying to this trip when you had reached out to talk about it, of like, okay, cool. Like, let's make sure and not to say you have to over optimize everything of like, oh, I did this and that. Like, I think I do believe in making that space for just pure fun or curiosity or things that don't make sense on a spreadsheet or on a reflection sort of thing. But to the extent possible, I do think it's helpful to ask those questions.
So, all right. So on the macro level, one, I'll just ask you the simple question. Would you do it again? If you had to do it all over again, was it overall a positive experience?
Overall, extremely positive. Yeah. Okay. And yeah, I think it was like, everyone's different, obviously, but for me, I had this thing I've been wanting to do. It was like I was in the ideation phase for maybe years, and to move into iteration, to actually go out and do it. It was a vote for my own identity. I'm a big believer in identity, of like, oh, I like the idea of that. Oh, I could be traveling. I could go to South America. I could learn some Spanish, just be like a little more worldly, empathetic. But then, like, how am I actually doing it? Well, it got to the certain point you just had to pull the trigger. So, overall, yeah, it was the most transformational, year probably, of my life. Definitely for once this external different environments, but really learned way more about my internal self and just overall awareness, I would say.
Okay. So Midjourney, the AI, it's an AI program that generates images. All right. So you're going to generate, so obviously the key to AI is to be really good at prompts. What is one moment that if you were to go to Midjourney and you wanted to describe and prompt Midjourney to create a painting for your new apartment in Austin of your journey, what is one moment and how would you describe it that you would want to look at as the highlight of the trip, that just right now, immediately a flash, a slide comes into your mind of, okay, there was this time where you just really almost, you felt it innately in your stomach that you're like, holy shit, I can't believe I'm getting to do this. Do you have one of those moments?
Mm-hmm. So the first thing that popped into my mind was, seeing this in Buenos Aires, seeing this little boy with his mom and his grandma. He's crying tears of joy as Argentina won the World Cup. Oh. And just the amount of love for something much bigger than, one person, one team. It was like just pride and joy and people high-fiving each other. The grandma is teary-eyed. The boy is like literally tears of joy. And it was just pure love. And one of the things I think about is that love is an action verb, not a noun. And it shows up in a lot of different ways. But it was one of the most profound ways I've seen love in this world is beautiful.
Awesome. Did you have any moments of either fear, of loneliness, of anything that then, if you were to prompt the low of the trip, what that would look like?
All the above. That was, I think, too, part of the experience to feel such a wide spectrum of emotions and all the things from the highs of meeting people, going out with different people, and the cool experiences and the adventures, to being lonely, to being like I remember this time I was in Brazil. I don't speak Portuguese and was living in this place of kind of like, yo, what am I doing? And being okay with it, of like, yeah, that's, I'm moving in the direction in which I want. And then there are going to be those low points, as there could be low points here or wherever. But directionally it still felt right. But just to feel those and to not try to optimize them out, and just to be okay with feeling that, I think helped me sort of develop, just to be like, oh yeah, that is what that feels like. And now I appreciate the days of not feeling that, and have better ways to magnetize myself towards the feelings that I want.
So one of the things that I personally experienced the first time I came back from my first really big overseas trip to China, which was, again, mountain highs, literally and figuratively, and valley lows of, dehydrating, thinking I was going to die and never come home. I remember after I had come back and I'd been back in the States for a little while, I was, and I still, as I think about it right now, it's like, man, I miss feeling almost the sense of desperation and fear and all those kind of just challenges that you go through when you're in those positions, because you can't really simulate them. Like, I guess I could come to Austin and say, hey, Mitchell, I need a favor. Will you drive me out to the middle of nowhere and leave me for dead and see if I can find my way back? Okay, I could probably simulate it that way. I mean, West Texas, we go from Central Texas to West Texas, but we're not going to do that. And so I remember thinking, God, as awful as that was, as much as I thought, I literally thought I was going to die, I'm so grateful. And I wish I didn't have to go put myself in that kind of harm to feel something, to appreciate life so much. Have you had any of that? Like, what's it been like since you've gotten back, reflecting on your time over there, where it is such, different cultures, different views on family, again, community with regard to World Cup and football, which I spent last Sunday watching the David Beckham documentary on Netflix. So I am officially a FIFA expert, and I know everything there is about Manchester United, Real Madrid. I am the expert now. So ask me any questions if you want. And so how has anything changed to come back? Do you look back on it and go, God, I kind of want to go that again? Just any mind shifts that have happened since you've come back to the States?
Yeah, honestly, there was this period that I'm just now finishing, I think, of reverse culture shock, where it's I didn't realize that was a real thing. I've heard of culture shock going other places, but when you come back, just to sort of get back into, it's like you have these new data points. You've seen a bunch of things. It's been a good stress test to be like, what do I believe? What do I want? Do I want to keep traveling and keep going? Or do I want to have Austin as my home base? Do I want to buy a house and buy a bunch of things and put in it? And I was like, I have a little bit of resistance towards getting a bunch of things, because I feel a little trapped. Once I do, it's like, oh, that's interesting. Why do I feel trapped? Why do I this and that? So, I think, yes, it's been going back to your point about a believer that once we have these experiences of doing, call them challenging things. I went on this hike in Brazil and, with a couple of my friends there, and we didn't realize how quickly it was getting dark. And it literally, we got to the waterfall, then we were like, oh, we should probably head back. Sun come down, and then it was pitch dark. Like we were using our phones in this like forest hike, which like don't recommend. But it was fun. We finished it and grabbed a bite at the bottom, and the amount of like connection and just like, it just felt really good. We did that really hard thing together. And then now we're like, we worked through it. And so what are the equivalent things, either individual projects or shared? I feel like with me going back to that curiosity and wonder, I think it like I've thought about this before. We sort of know the answers, for some things or at least the direction. And I think about just my natural curiosity and putting out content and writing about things. And I'm doing this 100-day challenge right now with a group of people of, pick whatever thing you want to do and improve on it and do it for 30 minutes every single day for 100 days. And you're going to get better at it. It's going to be hard and it's going to stretch you, but that's kind of the point, right? And so, I've been writing this weekly newsletter. Tomorrow will be the 98th week in a row. Haven't missed a week. And that's been good. And that's been a good moving from the ideation of, oh, maybe I should write online. Maybe I should have a newsletter, to the iteration of like, oh, I get real time feedback. And every single time I get a little bit better, I get some more feedback of like, oh, that's interesting. I like this. And people seem to resonate with this concept over here. And so I could have ideated about it for, 200 weeks, but just a couple weeks of iterations giving that feedback. And so, and now I'm also like prioritizing my podcast and doing these things that I've wanted to do. I didn't know the tactics or logistics quite yet. I guess for some of them I did. I just haven't prioritized it for myself. And then just saying, oh, once this 100-day challenge came up, I was like, yeah, I'm going to sign up for this right now before I talk myself out of it. Cause I could definitely see that happening. And so it pushes me a little bit in that direction. And there's been times that 11:30 p.m. I'm like, shoot, I haven't written today. I do not want to do it, but I made this commitment. So here we go. And I think that's step one. Like, what are we committing to move us in that direction?
Yeah, I'm really my writing is kind of pissing me off right now, to be honest with you, because I've got several things started. And my struggle with writing right now is like sitting down and crushing 1,000 words is easy for me. That is just like when I hear that like Ryan Holiday and other writers say, write 1,000 words a day, or James Altucher, that's so easy. What's hard,
really?
It really is. It's just
1,000's a lot, man.
I know, but it's just not hard. And I'm not saying it's any good. Most of it's crap, but I can get 1,000 words on a page easily. No problem. The problem is getting it, like having multiple things that I'm writing between, like I've got another, like here's a good example. So I've got this fictional book that I'm writing right now that is a psychological kind of just creepy, it's just pure like brain chewing gum for somebody. But, and what I struggle with, Mitchell, is like the reason why I don't have, hobbies. I'm sitting there writing it and going, what good is this going to do the world? Am I really going to spend this much time coming up with this little journey of fantasy of this just twisted, out of her mind young girl that's just pure evil? And yeah, it's a good story and it's got all these twists and turns and there's cool dialogue I can write. But I'm like, is that really where I want to spend my time? Or should I be writing a book on something that's more useful and beneficial and has true utility value? That can be fictional. I mean, like my first, published work of fiction was The Stone Chiseler, which was all about, man's search for meaning. That sort of inspired it. And it's about your identity and determining who you are regardless of your circumstances. So you can combine the two. I just don't have an inspiration for that right now. And so that's where I'm really, I struggle is like, I don't even want to sit down to write because I'm like, which one's the right thing to write about? And sometimes it's easy. Sometimes I'm just excited. I'm like, okay, I'm just going to flex the muscle of writing and not worry about what it means or whether it's got utility value or not. I'm just going to exercise. And I need to get better at that. But writing's a struggle for me right now, more than it probably ever has been.
Yeah. maybe a double entendre, maybe a triple entendre, but I'm noticing that your name is Jason Wright, and often asking yourself, what is the right thing to do, as it relates to your writing. But I can't help but notice I'm reading this book called The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer. I don't know if you're familiar with it at all. But
no, not at all. I'm gonna look it up.
It is, I think you would enjoy it a lot. He talks about all sorts of things, and I'm not done with it yet, but basically he's doing these things that make no sense. All he wants to do is, like, he started out, it's like, should I do this business stuff? No, I just want to meditate. And he's older. So this is in like the 60s and 70s, I think, maybe even before that. And then he ends up, building this small little shack in the woods. And then people are like, hey, I want to like come here. And they start this like sort of, I don't think it's religious at all, but just this sort of like meditative group. And then people are asking him to help them with the homes. So one thing after another, all these things that make no sense, but he's just sort of, saying, yeah, I guess I'll do this. Like, his intuitive brain can't like make any sense of it, but he's saying like, there's might be like a bigger power out there that's guiding him. And trust me, like even the title of that is like, I don't like the sounds of a surrender experiment. I want intentional control over everything I do. And that has been one of the lessons for me. It's like, where do I put that intentionality and, sort of that force that I know I have sometimes that works well in my life. And then where are other times where I should maybe let that go, and even notice like my awareness now, even how I state that, it shows up, right? Where should I do this? Where should I do that? Like, I want to optimize the thing. And so, it's just been another good example for me to be like, to be open, where I think about pushing versus pulling. And sometimes the writing stuff is like, man, I'm really pushing this thing uphill, and this is really hard. Maybe I should be doing this other thing. Versus other times I'm just pulled into it, and I was like, I can't not do this. And so I look for those areas of what are the things I can't not do. And then you don't have to worry about optimizing anything. You're just doing it.
I like that. And, I'm going to read that. I like that because I'm finding, and I think surrender is a good way. I think for me, what I've tried to do in sort of, I guess, unconsciously, is let myself know that, like, I think, again, with the over optimization, just over production, like I usually, on my best days, I'm going to go into the day with every hour written out of what I plan to be doing, what the theme for that hour is, whether it's writing, whether it's making phone calls, podcasting, editing. It's going to, every hour from usually, I don't count my morning routine. So starting around 7:30 when the productive day begins till about 6. That's what it looks like. And now I've finally gotten to the point where I can go, you know what, screw it. If I don't want to write at 3:00 in the afternoon because it's a terrible time to write it, because I didn't write this morning, it's one of the harder things I need to put at the front of the day. It's all right. I'm okay saying that most likely the actuarial tables will read that tomorrow's going to come. It may not. I get it. But chances are better that it will than it won't. And I've also kind of surrendered to this thing too, Mitchell, is that if 20 years from now, this is what I'm doing is still, you're older, I'm older, and we catch up on the Jason Wright Show, shoot the shit, see how we've gotten better, see what we've learned, exchange some little nuggets of wisdom, and still haven't written a bestseller, still, still not blowing up in some area that makes it to where I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I get to do this and get paid for it. And it's fun. Just this kind of, it's okay. The experience is worth it. And that has ebbs and flows. I get, there are times where I'm totally like dialed in on that. Like, I love this journey. I love just, just kind of chiseling away in, very low elements of feedback the feedback loop being so far I can't even see it, to other times going, am I just wasting my time? And And I guess, and that's why I've allowed myself to say, if you are no longer enjoying this part, this little segment of the journey, then give it away. It's okay. You're not a quitter. You're just realizing that it's not adding value to the world or your life. So why are you, if you're just doing it to punish yourself or to try to be disciplined or exercise some sort of Jocko Willink extreme ownership, keep at it, even if it sucks. No, because if you can't find a benefit for yourself or the world, I've kind of gotten better at letting those things go, albeit though it can still be a struggle though.
Where I'm curious, either recently or ever, where have been the areas of your life or specific projects or things that you've worked on where you've had maybe the full or the higher levels of conviction where you're like, oh, there's no doubt here, I'm being pulled over here?
It's a great question, and it would be easy. It's the Vitruvian Lab app that I had created through passion.io. I was killing myself, stressing over it. And here's why. What I had to realize is that I'd spent a ton of money on it, a ton of time. I love content creation. I still want to teach and coach and satisfy that itch. But I was so obsessed with making that platform work as the delivery method for my courses, my teaching, anything I'm going to do in that nature as an element of not only passive income, but also doing so, having it created like, and here's why I like to teach and coach is it gives me a reason to go explore those books back there, drill it in, and then basically chisel it in me to such a degree because I've got to teach it, right? And I want to inspire people. I want people to know. I always describe it as like, I'm like the cat that brings the dead animal back to show its owner, brings it to the back door and says, look what I killed for you today. That's how I am about a lot of the stuff that we're talking about here. And dude, I finally one day sitting at that desk right back there here recently, I just canceled my subscription to the platform. I'm out, unsubscribed from every Facebook group that it was associated, just literally abrogated it from my life. It was the biggest relief. Because what I realized is that I don't have to use that platform, first of all, to get my message out, to eventually help people and teach them and coach them and mindset and health and these things that I'm working on. Also, it may not look like, it may not, I never wanted to just create a product and let that be the way that I help people with their health or whatever. But that might be what I'm working on that right now. So I'm like, that's okay. I can do that. It doesn't have to be this thing. So anyway, that was the one where I had to exercise Seth Godin's DIP principle, where I just had to finally say, it's time. You're out. And it was the biggest relief, dude. So that's the one that comes to mind.
Nice. So that's conviction to no longer do a project. How about the other way? Conviction to do something, or it doesn't have to be a full project, but maybe it's just a moment of like, whoa, this felt special, or this felt different.
See, that's one of the real struggles, man, because there's not a lot that I've done. Well, in a way, I have that with the podcast because of its growth. Whenever, I will have someone randomly, say, email me, respond, and say, oh, I heard this episode, and oh my gosh, I can't believe that's crazy. And I'm like, so I know that this is the one that I'm on the right track, but here's where, okay, let me tie that to a better point to your question. So I told you, I want to coach. I love to help people do what they want to do. So I've thought to myself, how can I combine the knowledge of this podcast, of presenting a podcast, getting a podcast started, with my passion for coaching and teaching everything. So most recently, I think it's that I'm going to create a course on helping people start. Sorry, Cotton's having a fit down there. Of helping people start their podcast. I want to, and that feeds into Texas Titan Media, and so I have a strong conviction about those, and I think that's probably the most recent one. But other than that, that's been the struggle, Mitchell, is that I've lost a lot of passion for a lot of things I once had passion for. And I couldn't tell you, other than staying healthy, loving Gimlin, and, building some businesses that I'm working on right now. I don't have anything I'm really fired up about. And that sucks. I don't have anything that I really jump out of bed and go, oh, I freaking can't wait to tackle either this book I'm writing, this company I'm building, this, right now I'm just, and I'm not in a low spot. I'm just at a real even keel of just kind of one day to the next, keep the projects going. So I'd say that's kind of where I am.
Well, this is interesting. I'm just curious what, so when we go into, it sounds like whenever I sort of think about these things of it's really easy to be hard on ourselves, to be like, oh man, like I don't have that thing. I look at a doctor and they've always had the conviction to know, like, want to go to med school and practice medicine. I like to see of like, how do I get momentum? Momentum is like a powerful thing. And where you are, it's like you actually have a lot of momentum because you've increased your surface area of experience with some of the business stuff, of connection with all the podcast stuff and putting yourself out on the internet, and flexibility to work on whatever you want to sort of tackle. So like you've mentioned the coaching and the helping others. Like let's just for a super quick thought experiment, remove all the tactics. Like why do you like the coaching?
I love watching other people succeed. I don't know. I don't have to be the guy standing on the stage. I'm quite content just being, I love, I think that's it. I think I like watching people grow, and I like to, and also it gives me an opportunity to use all of this, all the things that you and I talk about, read about, or into. It's not enough for me to just be the most optimized, healthy 48-year-old on earth and all that. I'm not that vain. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think that everybody should want to do that for their family's sake, to stick around and to be happy and to be joyful, and all these ancillary benefits of being well-read and a thoughtful human being. I want others to have that. And so I love, that's the coaching part. I like to talk, and I like to, talk about things that I'm excited about. And if I've got someone that's willing to receive that and learn from it and apply it in their life, that's just fun for me.
Yeah. Do you want feedback?
Absolutely.
So and I only sort of, pry here because I relate to so much of what you're saying. And I think a lot of the listeners probably do as well.
Yeah.
And one of the exercises I did recently that was super impactful for me is, was talking to a friend about, this like lower, it was going to start this like digital Etsy store. And he's like, dude, what? Like, why would you like, he's like, you're so much, more, like you have so much more like potential. I forget exactly how he phrased it. Than to do that. And he's like, just think about like remove all the tactics and what would you enjoy like working on? He said something like that. And I remember leaving the conversation. I was also reading the book at the time is 10X is easier than 2X by Benjamin Hardy and Dan Sullivan, and was just sort of resonating on that of like, enjoy the, working at a tech company. I work at AppSumo and enjoy the content stuff of writing, but I've always sort of dabbled as well as either having a side marketing agency or consultant type work. And my brain usually goes right to the tactics of like, well, what can I do? Where can I help people? I like helping people as well, but I realized that to remove that for a little bit and just to think, what would it feel like? Who would I maybe be working on with? And like, who would the customer be if I were to start this side, another different side business? And I narrowed it down to either athletes or musicians. I've just always thought it'd be cool to work with like NBA or NFL players or like rappers. And, so I was like, okay, well, like what would that look like? And start to zoom in a little bit. for say I was just like friends with some of them, and what would I offer them? Like what do I see that they maybe don't see, or where I help? So kind of adding back in the tactics. And then that led me down to athletes in particular, specifically college athletes, now that the NIL has been passed with name, image, and likeness. And I then started to notice a pattern or an intercept of the Venn diagram of things I'm either interested in or know about or curious about. And that these college athletes now, I'm a big believer that we all individually are like, almost like media companies first, and then whatever our profession is. Even if you're a lawyer, you're like first a media company. You could be, you could practice law, you could practice medicine, you could practice, marketing or whatever. But I think we're like more verbs than we are nouns. And so like, rather than, I'm just a lawyer, it's like, no, you're a person who practices law, you enjoy writing, you do all these other things. And at the college level now, like they literally are a media company, or they're now an entrepreneur, and they're getting these brand deals. And there's a group called player development at every university that handles all their off the field stuff. And before, that's like your academics and, thinking about what job you're going to get after graduation. Very few are able to go pro. And now player development is like, hey, you're an entrepreneur now. Like, how do you look at yourself and how do you structure your small business? And with AppSumo, we're like one of the number one marketplaces for entrepreneurs and small businesses to grow. And my group in particular is AppSumo Plus, is the memberships team. And so we have a group of 20,000 entrepreneurs who are growing their business. And I've also worked a lot with creators or entrepreneurs on their content and write content myself. And so was thinking if I'm a college athlete, rather than just like grabbing my phone and doing a brand deal with Uber or Dunkin' Donuts and recording a video and putting it on Instagram, I would look at myself as a media company, and I would add additional media that I own, like a newsletter, not that's subject to an algorithm. And I would monetize that the same way I'm monetizing the other ones. And I would also look into things like a potentially a paid community, but more so just looking at myself as a media company. And the hypothesis is that brand, an audience is a really, really hard thing to grow and to get. Most people don't have that, but college athletes do. And so I've started helping, one in particular, and creating and growing his newsletter. And, I go back to the thought exercise that I did in Brazil at the time of remove the tactics, just who would I want to maybe work with, and then just make a list, and then just I just DM'd on Twitter, handful of people, a lot of people. I was thinking pros at first, but I was like, that's a little bit harder to connect with them. And so that's when I went to college athletes. And who knows? I mean, we're only a couple months into this, but it's one of those things where directionally it feels like a good bet in terms of moving from that ideation to iteration. And version 3, 4, 5 is going to look very different than version 1, but I will learn so much more just by picking one direction, getting some feedback, seeing if I like it, seeing what happens.
I think that's an excellent idea. And you just brought up something that, again, kind of going along the coaching that I have a passion for, because I guess it's James Quandall, our mutual friend, told me one time that someone told him that you should write about the things that you're angry about, because you're going to have most passion. You either try to fix something or you're mad just because that's a message in you haven't let out. And one of the things that I'm kind of frustrated about and that I would like to cure is the lack of mentors that a lot of these young men in particular coming out of undergrad have. And be it the college athletes that are going to now being celebrity. They're basically celebrities at the college level and then possibly beyond. But even that, that's something that I have a passion for that I really should execute on. I haven't. Is I would love to have a group of mentees coming out of undergrad and be their first mentor on just the basics of networking. How are you going to build your brand within an organization from day one, and teaching these young men in particular, and not because of anything against women, it's just I know men best because I am one. And so just kind of picking my lane and kind of narrowing down my niche. That's how I'm, coming to that conclusion there is, and building that internal brand and having those identity-based habits, and just from day one having someone, because the chances of these young people today, one, they're going to be disseminated. They're probably not going to be showing up to an office like I was whenever I first started my career, where I had the president of the first company I ever worked for was my mentor. I mean, he became a mentor. These young people aren't going to have that most likely. And I think mentors are taken for granted. And so that's kind of what you're talking about. I think you sit in a position to be that to a lot of these folks, mentoring them on how to build their brand for the long haul and their messaging and that sort of thing. That's another thing that I would love to do. And here's another thing, I could totally go out probably and crush it. And I thought I was going to at one point, Mitchell, as like an executive coach, a CEO coach. I mean, I could do that and probably make a lot of money doing it. I don't really want to. I'd rather shape a young person's mind and help them avoid landmines. That's something that I would be more passionate about, I think. So I can kind of relate in a sense there.
So that's perfect. I'm glad I shared that example because, I think that the specificity of all these things we could do, learn Spanish, the guitar, blah, blah, blah. But just picking one and having that, you're already kind of fired up about it. Like, what is the thing you wish you had on your journey that you now, you're 3, 4, 5 steps ahead of this person now. And just write, whether it's just your next, newsletter, or maybe as just like the quickest V1 of anything of like, here's advice to a 22-year-old, who just graduated college.
Yeah.
And there's something that happens on the internet of like, you could say, here's, tips I wish I knew earlier. And that's like very vague and probably not going to do well on the internet. But the very specific thing for here are 7 tips for a 22-year-old who studied business and is an athlete and wants to, make it in the business world or whatever. And get it like the very, very most specific thing as possible. That also helps with the creation project process of, you could write about anything. I struggle with this a lot of like, how can I make it easier for myself every Sunday newsletter to have a very specific theme? And then all the ideas come out. It's like, I could put it through that lens. And so, that could be an interesting, piece of content for you, or even like, your next project of take that thing that fires you up, that you're like, oh man, it really makes you upset that there isn't anything that exists. Maybe that one article turns into, a PDF for someone to download and join your newsletter. Maybe that turns into a course, and maybe that course turns into its own company or whatever. But, it's probably annoying at this point, but it's just so I'm reminding myself of this, like, how can I add iteration rather than the ideation? And I think that there could be a perfect example there.
No, I think it's great. And it's one of the things too, like I've got a short window here, and that I think I'm not taking advantage of, in that Rylan and Abby are at that age. I mean, they both, just graduated from college and they're starting working, but they still have, that's their circle of friends are still, even if they've had their first job, they're still trying to get their legs under them and figure out, how do I get that job? I mean, I got so frustrated with Rylan, my oldest, who, when she told me she was looking for a job through Indeed, and I'm like, what are you doing? I mean, it's okay. You're looking for a job. You're nothing but a needle in this giant haystack of other applicants. Where's your network? I said, and I will lend you my network. You're going to have to really perform, even though you're my daughter. But let me know. And, I saw firsthand how my own daughters didn't know how to leverage a network and build a network. And look, I went to Stephen F. Austin State University, Nacogdoches, Texas. I was that guy that thank God, by God's grace, I learned early on the power of networking and mentors and never taking a relationship for granted. It's all I had. I didn't have, University of Indiana on my resume. I didn't have these things that or an Ivy League. I had to go and just hope somebody would take a chance on this kid from SFA. And I want young people to understand the value of their worth. And I think it's going to become more important than ever because they're becoming fewer and fewer in this. And I hate to sound like a cynical old man, but in this age of entitlement and, employer, tell me what you can do for me. And then I'll come, then I might exchange my labor for your money. I think just to kind of get these kids to say, hey, here's how the game can be played to your benefit. You can find that purpose, autonomy, and mastery, which whether you know it or not is really what you're going to want. It's not all about the money. And I can help you kind of find those things and then make those relationships that will make it beneficial for you. I mean, that's just, to me, that's a value. I watch how these kids, they all have a LinkedIn account. Their professors know enough to tell them to create a LinkedIn account. Their professors, because they're tenured or whatever, and doesn't matter what their network is, have no idea how to give them the skills to leverage LinkedIn to get that first job, to build their network, and to actually use LinkedIn for the massive tool that it can be. And so I think that would be fun to help.
I like it. Yeah, I think you should do it. You should, just think about what is that feedback? What is the smallest unit of action someone who just graduated should take, or like 3 nuggets, and then put that out there and have someone do it. See if they actually do it. See what happens.
All right. So that's something. I'm glad we had that exercise. Now, one of the things I do want to get into, because a topic that you sent me that I think is we could probably philosophize on for a little while, is this. You mentioned earlier that, and you're so right. And we've talked about relationships before, Mitchell, and what it means and how you have a successful one and why Mrs. Wright and I have that spark. It's because love truly is a verb. If you want a sustainable relationship, you got to treat it as such. And then you brought up the topic of happiness being a verb. Why don't you kind of give us some texture to that thought?
Yeah, so this was one of the first things I noticed when traveling, and actually what made me notice it was I would meet these people, and whether it's in like any event, any sort of type of person that I would meet, and they would tell me their age. And I met, a 46-year-old that looked 30, and I met this dude who was like, I think he was 75. And I tell you what, like, he looked no older than 50. And so it's like, how is this happening? Like, what is going on? Where's this fountain of youth? And I realized that's when I sort of realized that, like, this happiness is a verb, and the people that I've observed who are the happiest are doing something there, whether it's this dude from Canada who was down in Mexico and was traveling. He had a business too, and or somebody who was scuba diving or had these hobbies or whatever it is. Like, it's them doing something, and realize that once you are doing what makes you happy, you feel happy, and if you feel happy, you look young. Mm-hmm. And it was just very clear to me that that's how that works. And the opposite is true too. If you don't feel happy, you probably are going to look unhappy and old.
I think that's so good. I had a cab driver, Abby's working in Manhattan now. And so we were, actually it was not a cab driver, it was an Uber driver that was taking us over to her apartment. And this dude was it's a beautiful man. He was like, I think he was like 64, same thing. He's in shape. These beautiful blue eyes. He was actually from, South America, and he was just happy and joyful. He was telling me about all these things that he did, like, outside of driving and everything. And I'm a big believer in that. And the physiological evidence is there. I mean, you can do the research on this, and minimizing stress, meaning happier people have less stress. More people that practice more gratitude have less depression. And therefore the physiological link between sadness, anger, stress, and aging quickly, having bad health, it is well documented. So I think that doesn't surprise me that you'd say that. So what do you do making it as a verb, I mean, I'd love to talk about this a little bit because I think I practice this pretty well myself. What are some things that you do to say, all right, I'm going to actively be happy today. I'm going to actively find happiness today, as opposed to just hoping that happiness shows up and knocks and says, oh, this is amazing. What are you doing?
Yeah. So part of it is just like a quick self audit of, I have these personal, values, which whenever people talk about personal values, it's like, yeah, whatever. But I actually think that they're quite helpful, and more so it's yes to have them, but also the process to think about what they might be. And so that's an exercise I recently did. Again, I just have a single note in Evernote, and rather than it was very powerful for me to understand that they're malleable and we could change them. And so a couple of years ago, this is kind of interesting actually, I had updated mine. I was like, okay, I feel good about these values. And again, they're just words, whatever. And, but it turns out they could actually have an impact. And so I had figured out my 4, and then I was watching this TED Talk randomly, and this dude was talking about adventure. He was talking about this is a core value for him, and this is how it shows up. And he was so lit up about adventure. And I immediately was bummed out because adventure was not one of my core values. I was like, oh man, I want to be the adventure guy. And then right after that, I had the realization. I was like, oh, that was silly. Dude, you could be the adventure guy. You make the rules. And so I added adventure that day to my list, and I was all pumped up about it. I was like, oh, nice. Yeah, adventure is a core value. And then it wasn't until this was a month ago where I went back through and updated my own core values. And I was just following the trail of if I'll do, say I have 4 on there from a few months ago, I'll just press enter a few times. And then I'll say October 2023, and here are the 4. And so you could see throughout time, almost like we're an operating system. And here's the latest update. I think about that concept a lot. And I went back through of when did I add adventure? And literally it was within a month or 2 that I added adventure, and I actually decided to go to South America. And I didn't put that together at all before. I was like, oh, wait, maybe this was me being adventurous. And so it turns out that you could think about something, and I don't think it's woo. I don't think it's manifestation. I think it's more about selective attention, and whatever we decide to sort of focus on, the brain will make happen. And I think that's a very real thing. And so, most recently it is, I have my personal values just to a simple acronym of HIRE, HIRE, of health, integrity, relationships, and energy. And again, they're just words. I don't think it's interesting. I have a thing where I unpack specifically of what does that mean and what does that feel like. But I think for that, the exercise for the listeners is just to have that. And then the one that I really am resonating with now is the relationships, specifically the connections. That's family and all that, but that's also exactly what we're doing right now. It's my favorite thing ever, to think about things, to have interesting conversations. And when I think about what does my ideal week look like, it is to have one of these conversations every week. Specifically, I'm blocking out time on Fridays for my own podcast. And then if that feels too hard, how do I make it easier? And so I'm doing this concept of just these 20-minute conversations that I'm going to do a series on my show of just quick, sort of almost distilled of just my favorite thing that I'm learning from this person. And so my dream week comes from what I value most of this relationships and connection. How do I have that on a consistent basis, or at least test that? And that's sort of how I look at it.
What is a big, I don't know if we call it dilemma, contradiction, just something that you're trying to process right now and to kind of help you think through that? One of the things I struggle with right now is obviously the Middle Eastern conflict. I know a lot about it. I want to be, I just see I see so much self-worship. Okay, I'm going to distill it down to that. I see so much self-worship in the United States of America in particular. People just are. And so I want to be a positive impact in that world. And so I struggle with being too sharp. I want to bring a sharp edge, but at the same time, be loving, be open, be all these things, but also explain to some of these people that are setting themselves up for a miserable life, being so focused on the outside world and thinking that, and so many people thinking they're so much smarter and learned than they are, and not being cynical about that, but trying to be a positive impact in this, frankly, what seems to be, like I've said this to you probably before, we're living literally in the best of times and the worst of times. We've never had more wealth, comfort, food, knowledge at our disposal. It's there for the taking. We've got everything you could possibly want. And yet we've never been collectively, I'm not, you're not, but just watching from my vantage point, I've never seen so many people so miserable in all my life. And in the suicide statistics and depression and the antidepressant prescriptions, they all kind of bear that out. And I want to be a positive influence on that. I'm struggling to figure out what my role is in that without doing my nature, which is to just check out, go off the grid, take care of mine, have conversation, curate every single freaking conversation and interaction I ever have. And not do hopefully you some good, because we'll learn from one another, but not do any of the quote unquote greater good. So that's kind of mine. Do you have anything like that you're processing, that you're trying to figure out and sort out and having to really dig deep to kind of come to some conclusions?
Yeah, I think constantly, right? One of the things I was thinking about is everyone's different, but I think definitely for myself, and maybe other people feel this too, I get utility and enjoyment or fulfillment from solving things. And so I think about when am I in understanding mode versus solving mode? And I think with a lot of content, it's a slippery slope to constantly be just in understanding mode. And, I'm reading this book, I'm listening to this podcast, I'm taking this course, I'm doing XYZ. And the thing about understanding is you could get to, say we have a problem we're trying to solve. You could get to 100% understanding, which is impossible, by the way. You can never fully understand something and you still have the problem, right? And So instead you could understand a little bit and then move from understanding mode to solving mode and see, I was actually trying to solve the wrong problem. I don't even care about this at all. I'm going to go over here. Or, what I thought I was trying to understand, I had no idea until I moved over here. And so, I try to take these very, very small bets of what am I trying to solve and what am I trying to do, and to kind of get some feedback on it. And as soon as I realize of like, whoa, this is too big, I can't solve that. That's a clue for me to either try to break it down or maybe try to solve something else. But going back to like the what I believe, or what is my life investment thesis, or at least just what are the current bets that I have right now. That's one of the ways that I think through it.
Yeah, I like that. It kind of reminds me of someone I once read this, that the difference between library knowledge and actual deep knowledge. Library knowledge, and we have a lot of people on Twitter that have library knowledge. They know what the book is, they know what the book's about, so therefore they think they're an expert on the book, but they really don't know anything about it. I like that, because I think what we've come to, and kind of the thing that I told you I struggle with on these geopolitical issues and just social issues, you name it, is that we erred to the side of understanding. I think we've got more understanding probably on multiple fronts than we've ever had. And when a lot of the folks that had kind of gotten the understanding point to that, when they started getting a baseball bat taken to their head when they tried to solve. They tried to take the understanding to solution, and they got a baseball bat across their face. And so now we've got, everybody has a lot of understanding, but if the solution, even if we all agree what a solution is, and pick your topic, I'm not going to name any because I'm not going to get either one of us in trouble here, But if you take any of them, and the likelihood of you getting, ejected from your seat, you're like, so people are like, yep, I understand. I understand the problem. I have looked at it thoughtfully with a good heart, with an open heart, with an open mind. And I get it. I've listened, but I understand it. Now, can I tell you what I've also learned about possibly solving the problem? You can, as long as your solution is this. And if it's not, yeah, we're going to hit the ejector seat. So, but I think you really nailed something there, Mitchell, because I think we have a lot of people that whatever the problem is, they've thought that understanding was the main priority. Understanding the problem. And this could be scientific, right? This could be like trying to, put a man back, Elon Musk. He understands how a rocket works, and he understands why SpaceX had a failed launch. He understood. I get it. I understand it. But then he will take the understanding to the solution. I think we've got a lot of people. And by the way, here's the problem. It's reinforced almost on social media. Social media rewards people understanding problems as opposed to solving problems. Do you think? I mean, I think you really opened something up there. I think that's kind of brilliant.
Yeah, I think that it's right. Or I mean, I'm just from my own behavior too of we naturally have this inclination to understand, and especially if you're curious. And one of the things I think is also just like the pleasure versus pain principle, where it became abundantly clear that, every single thing, every decision that every person makes can be really narrowed down to seeking pleasure or avoiding pain. And we have loss aversion. And so we're much more likely to try to avoid pain than we are even to seek pleasure. And so by introducing content, like even look at headlines of content of like, if it's 10x your productivity, stop wasting hours. We're really like, should I read this thing because I don't want the pain of wasting hours? Or maybe you do want the pleasure of having a shortcut, or, take any other, TV show that you watch or whatever, like anything that you do, you could see what is the pleasure component and what is the pain component. And in that, I think removes a layer of the fluff and kind of understands ourselves of like, oh, okay, I can tell myself one thing, but really when you find the pleasure and pain, that's the real thing going on.
I think that's true. Now, whenever you were searching the universe to solve some of these big problems, you understood them, you wanted to solve them. Did you do an ayahuasca ceremony to kind of get some clarification? I saw that on your notes, dude.
So as soon as I started,
sorry, my phone's not supposed to be on.
You're good.
Go ahead, brother.
So as soon as I started traveling, would meet up in these different groups and make new friends, and plant medicines would often be brought up, in particular ayahuasca. And I heard some crazy stories, and some of these stories, the majority of them was like, it's the wildest thing ever. And it was very, very brutal, but there were some insights at the end. And I was thinking, and everyone will be like, when you're ready for it, you'll know, like without a question. And so I remember thinking like, you guys are nuts. That sounds cool for you guys, but like your boy's not going to partake in that. And that is what I thought was going to be the case. It turns out I was ready. I found myself in, Puerto Molares in a jungle and down in Mexico. And, I decided that I was ready for it. And going back to the surrender thing, I actually didn't decide myself. Literally, this chick at a grocery store came up to me and asked me if I've ever done plant medicine or ayahuasca. And I was like, what? No, but what are you talking about? And we just started kind of talking, and we grabbed a juice the next day, and she was saying how it was like very impactful for her. And she's had a bunch of these random like intuitions before of her telling friends of, hey, I think you're ready for this plant medicine. And I'm like, dude, you're crazy. What are you talking about? And she's done this with like 3 or 4 other of her friends who have had this very profound experience. One of her friends, her best friend, she lost touch with for 4 years. And she had this same feeling to tell her to do the plant medicine. And she's like, I can't just hit her up out of the blue. That'd be so random. I haven't talked to her in 4 years. The next day, her friend texts her out of the blue, random. And so she's like, okay, now I can't not tell her. So she tells her, her friend comes down, has a ceremony, has this like very transformational experience. She's got like 4 of these stories. And so, I am somewhat practical. And like I said, I like to optimize things. And so I think that, so she told me about it. And I sat for it for a couple days, just kind of walking around like, should I do this thing? And it was one of those things that it felt very much right for me to do. And like, I'm pretty practical. I could even hear myself being like, I don't know, like maybe I would get a sign if like a random chick at the grocery store told me or something. That's literally what happened, and ended up doing it. And the way I would describe it is the most intense, insightful, and beautiful experience that I've ever had. And in that order, because the intensity is something that I've never experienced. But I had so many takeaways and learnings that I wrote a whole what started as a Google Doc, but I ended up publishing on my blog of just the whole experience, and a lot of connection to either ancestors or people who have passed, as well as just like life lessons, like tactical things that I now am doing that before I was not doing.
So where do you think that, and I missed that. I need to go back and look at that installment of your newsletter, because I don't remember. I think that one would have stuck out. I must have somehow missed that one. So what, and logistically, have you researched a sensor before? Does it just relax your amygdala to such a degree that your mind is able to just kind of, the things that may have presented subconscious or conscious fear before, to even kind of contemplate, a life choice, whatever the case may be? Are you in a state where you're now just in such an open place where you allow yourself to think those thoughts and then kind of contemplate them? I mean, what does kind of define, like if you can, a breakthrough that you had that like this is something you're doing now and you feel okay doing, thinking, pursuing, whatever, questioning as a result of this that you would not before? And can you go back to the pre ayahuasca and say, yeah, here's why I thought that might be kind of something on my radar, but I couldn't even consider because I was scared or whatever. Like logistically, I mean, how did some of that stuff flesh out?
Yeah. So in terms of exactly how it works, I did do a good amount of research, aka I just listened to a bunch of podcasts.
Yeah, I mean, you got Aubrey Marcus right there in your backyard, and I'm sure you could probably connect with him. So that dude's not afraid to go on an ayahuasca trip and report back.
Yeah, I guess it turns out it's becoming more common now than maybe it was before, and definitely did a decent amount of research, and still everyone's different. I'm not even advocating everyone do it just because I just shared, and I put that disclaimer in the blog post. This was my experience, and I think that there's a lot of the environment in which you do it, and the instructor, they're called like shamans and whatnot. It's very important to have a place that you trust, and the container that they hold is part of the experience. And so 3 separate people that I know and trust have done it at this exact place. And so, and they say that is their favorite place. So once I heard about the first couple, I was like, if I were to ever do it, it probably would be this place. And then it just so happened this like interaction at the grocery store kind of nudged me there. And in terms of like actually what is going on in the brain, no idea.
Yeah.
Still. And so like one of the takeaway at the very end of the blog post is like, sure, maybe this is just what happens of these random insights when you are tripping on psychedelics in the jungle. But there's just way too many, like I connected with way too many of them. I can give you some examples of anything from feeling the same sensation that I felt back in the womb, where I was trying to like figure things out, but like nothing was really working. And, I had this condition where, I was rushed into the ICU right when I was, born, and I was there for like 22 days, and they didn't know if I was going to make it or not. And so, I I had this kind of chaotic birth, right, of coming out. And some of this stuff I think shows up to this day where I have a hard time asking for help. And one of the intuitions was, or one of the takeaways was, I felt that feeling in the womb where I was almost like trying to like grab onto things, but nothing was working. And so I was like, okay, I just got to figure it out. And so like I've tried to ask for help before and it wasn't working. I don't know. That was just the one take of it. But at the same time, the realization was like, I have so many amazing people in my life today that not only could help, but would want to help. And so
now you had that thought during the experience? You had that thought
during the experience.
Because when you first started describing that, it kind of scared me to death. I'd be like, oh my God.
It was more emotional than it was like physical. I didn't feel like that. I just like intuitively like felt that that like thought process. And so, yeah, I had a handful of people of like, oh, I can reach out to this person and ask whether it's for work stuff or, side hobby stuff or whatever, of just asking for help. And there's something I know I don't have an inclination to do naturally. And so that reminder was huge. Had this like connection, like very, very deep spiritual connection. I'm not religious, but I consider myself spiritual. And, my grandmother who passed away when I was 2, I've always had this like connection with for whatever reason. And whenever we see ones like 111 or 1111, always like feel like there's a lot of my family that connects that with her. And I've always felt something with that. I never really know exactly what, but like she showed up in such a crazy way. Like literally the lady to my right, when we're sitting down, there's like 18 of us in this outdoor hut in the jungle. And she looks at me before, and like, she's probably, I don't know, middle age, but she's cool. She's got like a short haircut, and she's just like, she looks at me and she just gives me a big hug. And I was like, oh, that feels really nice. And like, I couldn't help but notice, like, this actually reminds me of how my grandmother would probably look or feel if she were still around. And sure enough, as we start, I was like, oh, this is like, I was very scared throughout a lot of the stuff. And every time I would be like, I would either see or feel this middle-aged lady's presence right next to me. I was like, oh, this is my grandmother. Like, this is that. So like, it gets way crazier in the blog post, but, those were some of the things where, it's okay to ask for help, and there's not like a wrong decision. Like, I'll be supported, which with whatever sort of direction that I go. And then a bunch of individual messages to different people. And I kind of kept going back to health is number one. That was a big thing, which I've prioritized health the last 5, 6, 7 years, but I've never been like, very, very clear, like, hey, it's number one. So like, if health is number one, what role does alcohol play in my life? Well, it'd be really hard to like prioritize, like have any role if health is number one. So I'm still, again, to make it easier for myself, rather than saying I'm never drinking again, I'm just not drinking right now. And I haven't since. And a handful of other things like that. So, it was pretty powerful for me.
That sounds like it. It's interesting that you mentioned the drinking one, because as you know, I don't drink alcohol anymore. And I went the exact same thing. I refuse to say I don't drink, because then it makes it this more rigid, and I didn't want it to be that way. I didn't want to face willpower by arbitrarily throwing. I was like, if I want to, I'm just right now, I don't. And I'm going to chase that lack of want to its end. And then having not done, now I'm OCD as someone who gets on a streak. I mean, there's nothing that discipline's better than a streak, you know? And, I don't know if you've had this yet, but if you do take this to its really lengthy conclusion, like it's been 5 years since I've had a drink, I will have dreams that I accidentally drink at a party. Like I grab a glass, take a drink, or I'm just not thinking. I just have a lapse in judgment. It freaks me out, man.
I've had that dream.
Oh, it's so weird. I'd like to I like to talk to somebody like a psychologist about that, just to get more insight on. I mean, not that I'm worried about it, just kind of curiosity. What does that mean? It's probably just as simple as, it's something you really don't want to do, so therefore it has a priority in your subconscious. And it's interesting that was one of the manifestations of it. It's so interesting because it was Ben Greenfield that he did this whole deal. Of course, he's a Christian, and he had this big kind of like, is it okay to do plant-based, trips and that sort of thing? And I don't know if he's ever done ayahuasca or not. And because a lot of people say, that Christians will say it brings them closer to God. And his contemplation was, well, if I have to do something like that to get closer to God, then is it right? So he was kind of bringing up some of these questions. I'm pretty sure it was Ben. And so it's interesting to hear kind of like, it was funny, just kind of from a satirical standpoint, growing up as a Southern Baptist, listening to your experience into the hut. I'm like, God, dude, just sounds like you went to your first revival from when I was a kid. I don't know. They wanted me to go down there, accept Jesus into my heart, but I wasn't sure, like, no, guys, I'm good. And then all of a sudden I felt like it was right. The Holy Spirit just led me down, And so, so it's kind of the parallels. And then some of even the revelations that you had are just kind of, it's weird. I'm sitting here literally contemplating this in real time as a believer and going, that's nuts, because something really cool came out of it, which is that resting, that it's okay. You don't have to have it all figured out. There is help, like obviously for me as a believer, I'm like constantly like reminded that, hey, whether you go through door A or door B, Jesus is going to be with you through that next door. I mean, that's my faith. But it's one of those things I struggle with a lot, of like thinking I'm on the tightrope. There is no net below me, even as a believer. And so I think it's pretty cool that you had that experience to be able to say, I'm not alone. I'm surrounded by people that are there to answer whenever I need the help. And then now the thing for me, it's the same thing with like acid. And it's just me. I grew up so sheltered. And so I'm the typical Southern Baptist. It's not like I made all these great decisions. I don't want to be self-righteous. It's just the culture I grew up in, but LSD and all that stuff, in addition to me not ever wanting to do drugs just because of, I guess, again, cultural and the way I was raised, but like it scared the crap out of me. It just, anything that you go on some kind of trip or mind altering, it just scares me. Were you ever at any time during it, like, did you have any massive like fear or anything like that because did you feel out of control? I guess that's kind of, because that's one of the things that scares me.
The answer is yes.
Okay. And how was that? Did grandma have to give you lots of hugs during those times?
And that answer is also yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Cause I'm the same way, right? Like I want to control the environment, which like, probably we can unpack that. Yeah. But again, going into it, it's like, all right, well, like where can I let go? And, this was something that scared me, but as soon as I made the decision, it felt right. So, and the one thing that everyone says that I talked to before is if you do anything, don't fight it. Just let it go. And I was like, okay. And so I actually think I did a good job of not fighting it. And so everyone's different, but there's a shaman and, he was this like 6'6" dude from Spain. He actually, I learned afterwards, he played professional basketball in Spain and Argentina. And there's a couple people in the group that flew from Spain just for this ceremony. And so he leads it, and there's a couple facilitators, and so you do the first cup, and the people I had talked to before, it's like, you'll know if like you should probably do 2 cups, like, but you'll know, and whatnot. So I did.
And describe that for me, Mitchell. I'm so ignorant on this. Is it, when you say cup, is it like burning? Do you breathe it? Is it smoke? Is it drink?
It's just like liquid. Okay. You go up and there's there's a fire in the middle. It's very dark. You go up and then, and the dude is like, all right, here's your cup. And he also like speaks mainly Spanish. And so it's like, he's like asking how you're doing. I was like, muy bien. And, if he kind of like shakes some stuff around and gives me a cup, and I was like, all right, here, like, take it. It's kind of like a shot, and, does not taste very good. And then I go back and I'm like chilling, and I felt like very like euphoric he's also like playing music and stuff. and that kind of like helps guide your emotions through it. And it's beautiful. It's really cool. And then, I felt like euphoric of like smiling, and I almost wanted to laugh, but like I wanted to be respectful, and like I wasn't laughing at the situation or anything. That's just how I felt. And then I was like, okay, now I should do, I guess I should do the second cup. Like I definitely feel a little bit, but like, I don't know, maybe I did the second one. And so when he opened up the window for the second cup, I went up there, and then I noticed when I walked, I was like, oh, okay, this is a little tricky. Like, maybe I'm feeling it a little bit more. And then he pours the second cup, and, it was a lot bigger than the first cup. It was almost like a double shot. And I was like, oh, are you sure? But all right, here we go. And I took it down, and I got back to my seat, and it immediately starts storming. And so it's like, okay, like, here we go. This is the second chapter. And, you asked me if I was scared or if I, had let go of control. There was one moment in particular where, after the second cup, it was like gearing up. And when I talk about the intensity of it, and I tried to describe this in the blog post, but the way I describe it, and again, it's probably very hard to understand if you haven't done it, but, I talk about just like, going to this other dimension, and, the intensity in this dimension is just so dialed up. It's almost as if like take something that, say like your iPhone, for example, and you could take the brightness from 0 to 10, and 10 is the most that it goes, because that's just the setting. But then all of a sudden there's a setting that goes to 100, and then 1,000. It's so bright and warm. It's like, you didn't even know it could be that intense. So that's like one of the analogies that I'll use to it. And just like entering that kind of dimension where, just the intensity to be in there was so, massive that it was, it was the extremes of all feelings of like, oh, I didn't realize I could feel this. And take anybody that I know, I would understand what their pain was. And so it could be anybody. I didn't think I held resentment towards anyone, but, it could be someone like, for example, my grandfather, fought, in the Navy. He was a pilot, and he, would take off and land these fighter jets like during World War II era. And like, I felt his like courage and like his being scared of flying these things and knowing that like he could die or whatnot, versus like I felt my mom's pain and suffering in a few different periods of her life. And so yeah, it was just interesting to feel that. I was like, wow, I didn't realize I could feel that level of intensity of emotions, which was like ended up being like a pretty beautiful thing.
That's a trip, like, literally. I mean, that's wow. Okay, so will you do it again?
I was always confused how people would be like, yeah, I've done ayahuasca like 6 times.
Yeah.
Like, yo, what are you looking for? And so I would describe it as I got everything I think I needed from that, and it was perfect. I don't have intentions, to do it immediately again, but I'd be open to it. The people who have done it multiple times say like, you're shown so much in that state that like, it's hard to like make sure we remember all the things. And so that's why part of the reason why I wanted to write it all out, so I could remember.
So has it caused you to continue seeking? Like you had it's like you had a portal, and the portal's now closed, I guess, from that moment, but you still have the knowledge that there is a greater dimension. There is a heightened sense of consciousness that you can reach. So have you tried to replicate some of that through meditation, or just kind of, or to the tools that you were given as having that heightened sensibility to kind of draw on it and apply it? I mean, is that possible? Does it have that sort of utility to it?
I think so. And even recognizing like going into it, you change your diet. So no caffeine for 2 weeks, no meat, no processed foods, no sugar. And that process was a lot harder for me than I thought. I was like, oh, I could kick caffeine. Like, do that cold turkey, no problem. For like 6 days, dude, it was brutal. And that was just kind of a note, like lesson to self, note to self. How can I kind of remove these things that maybe have an impact on just how I feel day to day, of just like simple as that. And so I went, after I did it, I just went for, I think it was like 22 days in a row of no caffeine. And at first it was brutal, but then it was like, oh, this is great, because it just felt like closer to how I normally could operate. And before I'd be like, okay, well, I could have caffeine up till noon, my cutoff time. And I was always playing that game. Can I go a little bit later before? And with no caffeine, it was like, oh, I just have, as long as I'm working on something interesting, which I think for the most part I do, I just have this energy to roll, and I don't have to worry about, oh, am I tired? Do I have the right caffeine? So I did that for a while, but honestly, I've reverted back because I like coffee a lot. And so it's been a good reminder to go back through and be like, oh, maybe I should, and my diet's pretty good, but I think there's always ways to go back and be like, what am I, how can I just get base case of, either cleaner diet or less caffeine, or just like more moments of stillness, long walks. I've been doing a lot, removing like stimulus. Like for me, I always have these AirPods in my ear, listening to a podcast, audiobook. And, I realize that's great, but also it's great to let the thing simmer into connect the dots that otherwise we wouldn't connect. And so more periods of no AirPods, no stimulus, no, inputs, and let me create the space to connect the dots.
It's so hard to do, man. I'm the same way. Like every day for lunch, I create this green monster protein bowl that's just a big pile of goop with all kinds of nutrients in it. And I sit down and I want so badly. I'm trying to make myself not have my, not watch anything, not watch a TED talk, not listen to a podcast, and just enjoy food. It's so hard for me. And the caffeine thing. So I started trying to cycle off of caffeine every month or so, go for a week. And it is those first few days. It's like this, it just feels weird. I don't even really know how to describe it. It's not necessarily that I'm like lethargic. Now there are some energy components that I absolutely recognize, but more than anything, I do feel calmer. I'm able to, and it's weird. It almost has kind of like a counterintuitive effect on me in that I'm able to focus on one task and stay with that one task a little longer, because when I have the caffeine, my mind bounces. It's like the monkey brain. It's like he gets a shot of the caffeine. But I've tried to do that too, but and that's one of those decisions that I've made, is that one, coffee is important to Jemlyn and I. It's just one of those things that she and I share a love for. And two, it's like, I just love coffee. And if that's, and I think, I'm just not going to give it up completely, like I did with the alcohol, but I am cognizant enough. And same thing, Jocko Willink talks about that. He doesn't want to drink coffee because he doesn't want to have any sort of aid to his performance. He wants to know that if he's performing well, that it's all on him and his energy levels and all that. So I get that. And I do think there is definitely a benefit to take stock every once in a while of, okay, baseline. It's kind of like rebooting your computer every once in a while. I leave this thing on all the time, but every once in a while I'm like, yeah, it'd probably be good just to kind of restart this thing, kind of let it, set back. And that's kind of my take on not drinking coffee. But it's a game changer. It really, because I don't like to think I'm addicted to or depend on, and I don't have to have it right when I get up. But do I like working with my and using caffeine? Yeah, hell yeah, man. It makes it a little bit.
That's right.
Yeah. It's nice.
Yeah, same. I think about like earned dopamine versus unearned dopamine. And I like it too. So I do it, but I do feel like it's unearned dopamine. Whereas, the morning workout, you're earning that, or working on that hard thing early in the day, you're earning that. The coffee is a little unearned, but sometimes you use the unearned to earn the others.
Great podcast. If you haven't heard it yet, on Tim Ferriss's show, he had some dude that came on. So Tim Ferriss has his own coffee now. I've got to try that. I think it's called Cock Punch, which beautiful name, very, very nice. Well done, Tim. And this dude, you'll look it up. It's like the history of coffee. I can't remember what his name was. I listened to it. Dr. Mark Plotkin. That's it. Plotkin. You'll love it, dude. It's so fascinating. And listening to back in the day when in the different regions, why it's mocha Java, what Java is, the first coffee plantations, when it became a trade, how it was discovered, and just how writers and artists have written about it over the years and how they've depended on it for creativity and everything. It's if you're like I am, and I know you are, you just really enjoy really good coffee. It's actually one of the more because he just takes over the Tim. It's not Tim doesn't interview him. He just kind of Tim said, all right, and this is my guest host is this guy, and he has his own podcast on Botanicals of the Gods, I think is his podcast, where he talks about different plants and different things. So I'm gonna have to check that out. But anyway, so since we're on the coffee. Well, man, that's cool. I know nothing about you're the first person I've ever talked to that's been on an ayahuasca trip and lived to tell about it, or otherwise. So I'm fascinated by that. That's really interesting, man.
Thank you. Yeah, it was quite a ride. And so, I again, not for everyone, but, it felt right for me. And I think it was.
Well, Mitchell, dude, this was a good catch up. And like I said, I'm going to try to be, I'm going to be, unless something happens, I'm going to be in Austin, in December. And so if you're around, let's, go grab some coffee together. That'd be awesome. And, it's a good catch up, dude. Glad to have you back in, the city that keeps it weird, how is Austin right now? I mean, I heard Lex Friedman moved there. He's moved there. Chris Williamson's now moved there. Of course, we know about all the rest of them. Dude, y'all are going to run out of room. You already run out of room, but how is Austin?
It's good. Yeah. It's, like that was one of the things I had more conviction on after traveling a little bit of, I wanted to keep traveling, but then I was like, I have a lot of really good stuff going on in this city. So made me realize that I do appreciate a good home base and, connections or running groups or events. Those are all things that I really value. So, putting myself in the environment of the things I like just kind of made sense.
Well, good, dude. Well, glad to have you back. Can't wait to catch up in person. And brother, thanks for jumping back on. This was so much fun. This did my heart good, dude. So I hope you enjoyed as much as I did.
Likewise, amigo. Always a pleasure catching up with you, Jason. Thank you for asking me to come on, and look forward to seeing you in December.
You got it, brother. All right, man. Take care. Well, that does it for this episode of The Jason Wright Show. Thank you so much for listening. This has been a Texas Titan Media production. Fourth Wall did the music. And as always, thank you so much for listening. Please consider going out to jasonwrightnow.com and signing up for the Vitruvian Letter. Also, please go out to iTunes. It takes like 30 seconds to just leave us a 5-star rating. It does wonders for the podcast. I would be so grateful. And with that, until we meet again, go crush it and endeavor to improve always in all ways. I'm out.
At the Coca-Cola Company, Keurig Dr. Pepper, and PepsiCo, some of our bottles can be remade in a whole new way, using 100% recycled plastic. New bottles using no new plastic except the caps and labels. Learn more at madetoberemade.org.
Anatomy of an ad.
Subconsciously trigger emotions through music. Perfect.
Define an opportunity.
Imagine talking to millions of people across the U.S. like I am now.
Identify a problem.
Creating an audio ad is time-consuming.
Offer a solution.
Utilize cutting-edge AI. Imagine creating all that in under 30 seconds. Well, we did to create this ad. To learn more about AI in the audio industry, download the white paper from audiostack.ai.